Hopefully the audio will pick up for this one. So,
Hello, sir. Yeah, we've been to our library before. Yeah. Oh, awesome, perfect. They give you a seat downstairs? Okay. I'll plug in your email.
okie dokie, so.
It's just,
Yeah. All right. Give one more moment for everybody to get settled in. And then we can get going. Yeah, I think everybody, from what I can tell, that's going to be here is probably here, but.
Closed down about 3 years ago. Taking it seriously.
Let's see.
Thank you, enjoy the program.
All right, so we're gonna just kind of get this moving. So, all right, thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Daniel Ware. I'm the genealogy librarian here at the Kentucky Historical Society. And today we're basically going to be talking about the census and kind of how to use it and some of the types of censuses you may come across and that kind of thing, just kind of give you an option if you haven't really ventured into the looking at the census before. All right, so kind of some of the main points we're going to kind of talk about today are going to be kind of what a census is, how it can help you or what it can tell you. Some of the earlier censuses, there's the 1790 census that I'm going to talk about, the 1840 census, the 1850 census. Also talk about the 1890 census because I know people do try to look for it occasionally, and unfortunately it was most of it was destroyed. And also kind of where you might be able to find like the actual original copies of the censuses, because a lot of like what we'll get will be on like microfilm, and it might be copies that were given to us by other institutions and things like that. And also kind of go over some of the schedules and censuses, other censuses you may come across. Some of these you may not use quite as much as the main censuses, but they do exist and they may help you in some way. Okay, so what is a census? And how does it work? It's basically a total count of a population, and it can be of a state or a country. It can include economic and social information of the population, and it can assist the government in determining how to work with and assist their people or community or population, kind of give them an idea of, all that kind of information of the people that the government they're running, basically. Individuals will answer questions and provide information about their household or their occupation and things about themselves and other key pieces of information. And as I'll try to demonstrate and show with some of the census examples that I'm going to bring up, kind of how some of the things may have changed over the decades. Okay, so when you look at a census, what can it tell you? A census record can tell you many things and can help you with your genealogy research. You can learn things such as the birthplace, age, occupation, and other key pieces of information about your ancestor. The census can also show the family or other individuals who lived in the same household as your ancestor. And all this information can help you follow your ancestors' migration and learn more about them. I do look at census records a lot, especially if I'm trying to find, I'll have people come to me trying to find their ancestors' parents. And so a lot of times, you know, I'll try to look at a census record to see if I can find that particular person in the census and see what their household is that they're living in. Because it also, yeah, helps me kind of figure out, okay, where are they at county wise, or even in another state, or, you know, things like that. And, you know, you might be able to see who their siblings were, because you could also try to look for siblings as well. That could help you if you're hitting into a brick wall with your ancestor. So the early censuses, the first 9 censuses between 1790 and 1870, they were conducted by assistant federal marshals of the United States federal court system. One U.S. Marshal was assigned to each federal court district, and it was his job to hire and manage the assistant marshals to take the census in his district. In each territory, the territorial governor was responsible for the census enumeration. Okay, so first off, we're going to look at the 1790 census. It was the first U.S. federal. Yes.
You said territorial.
Yeah.
We're talking about state government?
It would be like I know there was like the New Mexico territory and things like that. So whoever like that governor was that was kind of running that territory. Yeah.
So it could be a state governor unless.
Yeah.
it's
I
not a
mean,
State, yeah.
yeah, because a lot of these territories, yeah, because they were already going on and participating in certain censuses even before they became like an actual fully fledged state. So,
Sorry.
oh no, you're fine. So yeah, the 1790 census, it's the first U.S. federal census taken. The date that it was first taken was on Monday, August 2nd, 1790. It was finished within 9 months. And there was a project of indexing the 1790 census name lists by the Census Office in Washington, D.C. in 1908. And that publication is known as the 1790 Heads of Families. So 1790 census, it has the name lists of 12 of the 16 federal court districts that existed at the time that the 1790 census was taken. There were losses as far as the 1790 census goes, which includes Kentucky, Delaware, Georgia, New Jersey, and Virginia. But thanks to Virginia having several tax lists that covered all of its counties for the immediate years following 1790, the Census Office was able to recreate the 1790 name lists for all of Virginia due to these tax lists.
Were those losses full or partial?
I honestly, I'm not entirely sure. When I have looked upon this, I didn't see like a specification on that. It was just kind of more of like there was these losses. And so I'm going to assume that it was entire, because I know like Kentucky, I was just talking about it earlier. And I'll actually probably mention it in a moment. But basically our like Kentucky 1790 census that we've got are basically just the tax lists from like 1789 through like 1792 or like the 1790s ish. And it was, from what I understood, more like, I don't know if it was like a group of people or certain individuals, and it was basically they collected the tax lists from like around that time frame, and then basically just made the name list. So like you can at least look at those and see that, you know, John Smith may have been living in Fayette County in, you know, 1791, you know, or in the 1790 census list that we've got.
Of course, Kentucky didn't exist.
Right. Well, and that's what, when I was reading into that, it was basically like they basically made it the Kentucky list because like they basically, yeah, took the counties that would become the Kentucky counties. And from what I've learned, even around that time, there was already kind of talks and discussion and of becoming a separate state. So I guess then when they made that list collection at some point, they just went ahead, made it the Kentucky census.
You did say earlier, it took them 9 months to complete it, though, so
Yeah.
depending on the projected.
Yeah, I was gonna say, by the time they actually formally got it together, you know, we probably could have already been Kentucky at that point.
Kentucky County, Virginia originally.
Yeah, it was Kentucky County, and then I think then that's when it broke down to Fayette, Jefferson, and Nelson. I, I can't, I always get the original three, because there's the original three counties, and I always get them a little mixed up, because then right after that, then you start getting, sprouting out of more counties like right after that. So it's, yeah, I get a little hazy on those first three counties sometimes. But yeah, it was, yeah. Mhm. All right. Okay, so yeah, so like I was saying, basically this is a 1790 census list, names list, and it is reconstructed from tax lists. And like I was saying just a second ago, technically they were Virginia counties at that moment. Uh, However, there was talk of new statehood that was already occurring at this point, and potentially by the time this was actually put together fully and published, we were probably already a state. Okay, and I'm going to jump up to the 1840 census mainly because this is kind of the last one that kept it to just the head of the household. And, after this is when you start getting a lot more information in the census records. So yeah, at this point, it still did not include the names of the whole household. Yeah, 1790 through 1840, it was basically just you got the name of the house, head of household, and you might have got like a tick mark, for, if you had males that were, 1 to 10, under 10, and then, you might have like males that are, you know, 20 and older, and, you'll have like basically tick marks in boxes up to this point. Um, so like previous censuses, it did include other information such as number of free white males and white females of particular age ranges, the name of the enslaver along with the number of enslaved, number of male and female enslaved by age categories, number of individuals attending school, and other pieces of information as well. Census after this would include names of everyone in the household and other detailed information. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is an example of I believe, Franklin County 1840 census. And I mean, you could kind of just see like a list of names down the left-hand side. And then basically, like I was previously saying, kind of like little, check marks, little ticks and boxes and things like that. And so you can still, like these censuses are still useful in locating ancestors and other individuals. It's just you kind of have to know potentially like the age of the person you were looking for at the time, because they may be that one tick in that particular box that fits like the you know that right age range, and if they were female or male and all that kind of good stuff. So if you kind of have done enough digging, kind of have an idea, then you might be able to say, okay, that could be potentially so and so living there at that time. But unfortunately, you don't get a definitive name or anything, so you kind of just have to do enough detective work to figure that out potentially.
Plus, you're taking you're taking information from somebody that may or may not know for sure.
I mean, well, and that's, yeah, always the case as well with the census. Yeah, that I do have to forewarn people, because a lot of times the census takers, they may, a lot of times they may have been, spelling or writing things down phonetically. And so they may completely misspell a name, and then you think it's a completely different person when you're looking at the census. So that's another thing you always have to look at, is that they always forewarn you too when looking at the census, is if you see a name that is clearly wrong, but it might look kind of close to the name you're looking for. And if like, it has the correct parents or siblings, other names surrounding that person that fit what you're looking for, then, that more than likely maybe the person you're looking for and their name just got misspelled, or they may have been given a completely wrong name by accident somehow. And I've also seen on census records before that, it would obviously it was supposed to be a son, and they'd accidentally mark them as female, or, they write in the wrong little letter, or check the wrong little box. So then, there's also that confusion and things like that. And I don't know this for sure, but I would also imagine that, some people may have not really taken to, people showing up at their house and asking them about their information and things like that, so they may have not really gotten a lot of information from certain families just because, they were distrusting of them and things like that. And
Your birthday might have been one, but they
Right.
recall something else.
yeah, that is
The
true
name.
too. Yeah, that's true. There's also the issue with like, if they had like a nickname or if they went by a middle name or, and that's what everybody knew them as, and that's what they were written down as and everything else, but then they're officially written down with their birth name in the census, and that might throw you off as well. And so, yeah, so those are also key things you do have to look out for when you're looking at a census as well.
It could also be male or female, like Francis.
That's true. There's also names that you can't tell, yeah, if it's a male or female, because, there's some names that can be used for both. So, yeah, you kind of also have to keep a lookout for that as well. Okay, so in the 1850 census, this first U.S. federal census to include more detailed information. It showed entire household. Information included for each person in household, the name, age, sex, color, place of birth, occupation, ability to speak or read English, if the individual attended school within the last year, and other things as well that you can glean from these censuses. Now, however, the one thing is the 1850 census did not include information on relationships between the household members. I know, I can't remember if it's the 1880 or 1860, but I know at least some of the later ones after 1850, they will show like how they're related to the head of household and things like that. So, so that does get included later on, but just not at this point, unfortunately. Now I do like 1850 census is like one of my favorite censuses, mainly because that's when I can start actually looking at that to see like full households and things like that. And so then when people do come to me with like research requests and they're looking for a certain ancestor, and if they were born after 1850 and they're going to able to be on a later census, 1850 census or later, that's good for me because then I can use that census to try to find them and potentially see who their parents were. If it's somebody who was born before 1850 or they were a child, and they're going to be in a earlier census than 1850, it's kind of harder for me to pinpoint, that particular person to see if that's, their father or their mother. So I do like this one just because I can see whole households and kind of get a better picture of, where a person may have lived. And then here's kind of a close up of a 1850 census, and there's a little more detail, and you get to see like full names and their ages and all that good stuff, and their birthplace and all that good stuff. Okay, and then there is the 1890 census, which most of it was destroyed from what I've understood. It was destroyed in a fire on January 10th, 1921, and it was at the U.S. Department of Commerce building in Washington, D.C. So yeah, I do have people occasionally that have stated that they've tried to look for 1890 census and they've not had any luck, and that's because unfortunately it like technically doesn't really exist anymore, unfortunately. Now there are some 1890 census like related information that you can be found in like Union veterans census indexes is what I've seen them be called. And we do have there is on microfilm that we do have here at the Kentucky Historical Society. It's schedules enumerating Union veterans and widows of Union veterans of the Civil War. And so a lot of times that little scrap of information, they'll take and use that to provide for the 1890 like census information that's been lost. Because here you can learn at the very least, it will show like what county they were in when it was taken. So, like the censuses before, you can see, okay, my ancestor was living in, Fleming County or Floyd County or Franklin County at the time that this was taken. So you can at least kind of pinpoint, okay, in 1890, they were living here. And then you could potentially then take that information and look for other records for that county that fit around that time frame. So like it can at least kind of steer you in a direction, even if it's not able to give you as complete information as other previous censuses. We also do have a copy of it's 1890 Kentucky Census Index. And if you can kind of see the picture beside it, it basically just lists the person's name and what county they were in. And then I believe I can't remember if it's the page number in the census or if it's the house number, but basically I have looked at this a few different times, especially if I'm looking for requests where, individuals were, living in the time frame of, like the 1880s to 1900s. I'll try to see if I can find like something from 1890 that's kind of in the middle to see where they were at this particular time. So it does at least give you like a name and a county, just a quick glance kind of thing. So you then can go and look at the county materials. And then here's pictures of basically what's on the microfilm. And so, yeah, basically I have a list of the name and what their rank was and things like that. And let's see, and like their enlistment and discharge dates and things like that. But it'll tell you like what county they were living in when they got the information recorded and things like that. So, you can find some of that kind of information potentially if, you're looking for that right time period. Okay, so where can you find the original censuses? So the original copies of the censuses between 1790 and 1870 are kept at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The original copies of the censuses between 1900 and 1920 were destroyed after being microfilmed in the 1940s. But then there's the 1880 census that the National Archives did transfer to different state archives and historical societies and state libraries and other institutions that were willing to take them. And from what I can tell, the later censuses, 1930, 1950, should be housed at the National Archives, just because basically they're the place that keeps most of them. So yeah, those are, if you're like, most people are probably just going to go to like their local library or the, historical society like here or somewhere and look at the census. Cause I mean, I don't think people would necessarily need to look at the complete original one as long as there's a copy of the census at, somewhere that you can easily get to and then find your information for. But, just in the off chance that, people might be curious, that's kind of generally where you can find those at. Okay, now I'm going to kind of go through some other censuses and schedules. Some of them probably won't be quite as, I don't want to say useful, but some people may not necessarily look at some of these schedules over other ones. But I do just want to kind of point out some different variety, I guess you could say, of what people might also look to in addition to the census. So there's 1885 non-population census schedule. There are slave schedules, mortality schedules, agriculture schedules, manufacturing schedules, social statistics schedules, and then there's also business schedules that were taken apparently in 1935. I'm just going to kind of briefly mention them at the end, but I just thought I'd let that be known. Okay, so the 1885 non-population census schedules, it was a special census that was sanctioned by Congress. And it basically let any state or territory take a census with federal assistance in 1885. There were only 5 states or territories that did take them up on this. These states and territories were Colorado, the Dakota Territory, Florida, Nebraska, and the New Mexico Territory. This basically included in similar format to the 1880 census, where it basically had the name of every person in the household, age, month of birth, relationship to head of household, marital status, occupation, and other key information. Now, the one difference that I was able to see that is apparently noted is that the 1885 census typically gave an initial letter instead of the person's full first name. So he may just be like J. Smith instead of John Smith. Okay, and then there are the slave schedules, which those as their own like separate thing were recorded in 1850 and 1860. There was obviously the information was included in like the 1840 and earlier censuses, but these were the two decades where they were kind of their own separate schedule. Slave schedules were prepared for certain states as part of the 1850 census: Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, District of Columbia, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, Missouri, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. And then in 1860, it was all the same states except for New Jersey. They didn't have one for that decade. So, but everybody else, it was the same for.
Are those still in existence somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have them on microfilm. So, and people do come in and occasionally look at them, especially if they're trying to research their African American ancestor. Just because it'll at least, they'll try to look for the enslaver and his family that owned their ancestor potentially. And it at least will tell you, like, now once again, it's one of those that it just basically doesn't give their name, just the enslaver's name. So, but it's kind of one of those, again, you kind of have to do detective work. And if like your ancestor was the right age at this time, they may be that particular male that was ticked off in the 16 to 25 box or whatnot. But yeah, they're still kept as far as like historical records, just because people do still use them to try to pinpoint their ancestors in some form. So the information included are like the name of the enslaver, number of enslaved individuals, age, gender, and many other pieces of information. These forms did not include the names of the enslaved, unfortunately. However, some enumerators apparently did include the names of the enslaved individuals on the schedule. So you may have that one lucky time where that person decided to write down the names. And so, that could be a lucky break, as far as, not having to do quite as much detective work. It's still really difficult, researching, especially this far back with, African-American ancestors, unfortunately. So there is a lot of detective work and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so basically these can at least maybe kind of help you pinpoint where your ancestor was living at, in 1850. And if once again, if you know enough of the information as far as ages and things like that of who you're looking for, you could potentially pinpoint, say, okay, this might be the person I'm looking for. And then you can take that potential information and try to look at like court records and things like that for, or wills, potentially, because if that person ended up, freeing his, enslaved when he died, he may, usually he would potentially list the names of those individuals. So, you can kind of take information from the slave schedule and go look at, wills and court records and things like that, especially if they did go to court, as far as, all the legalities, things and stuff like that. And here's an example from a roll that we have here at the Kentucky Historical Society. It's 1850. This is for Adair County. And like I said, yeah, it just kind of lists the name of like the owner, and then you'll basically get kind of like the, how many he had, and, kind of that kind of thing. So then there are mortality schedules. Those were created for the 1850, 1860, 1870, and 1880 censuses. These list names of individuals who died within the time frame of 1 year before the census day. So an example would be like for the 1850 census / mortality schedule. Census day for 1850 was the 1st of June, 1850. So anyone who died between June 1st, 1849 and May 31st, 1850 basically could be counted on that 1850 mortality schedule.
Was their names given?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would list their names. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, because the information that is included, and it is the name of the person who died, their age, sex, color, free or slave, married or widowed, place of birth, the month of their death, their occupation, the disease or cause of death, and the number of days that they were ill. So that can be handy, especially if they do kind of disappear between censuses. You may want to check a mortality schedule to see if they, if it recorded them, and especially I have had people that were curious, like why their ancestor died. They were like, I don't know why they died. So if you can find something like that and be like, oh, they died of consumption, or, they, died of some other kind of disease or illness, that at least kind of it fills in that hole, that mystery. And so, sometimes I have looked at this, especially if I'm like, okay, I can't find this person now. All of a sudden, I'll try to make sure they didn't die like at a certain key point, and that way it helps you pinpoint where somebody may be, or where they didn't, when they died and things like that.
You know how this information was collected? I mean, did
Um,
they go back out and canvass an area?
I'm gonna assume that that's what they did, because I mean, most of these like census schedules, I mean, yeah, basically they'd have people go out and, go to the different homes and gather the information. Now the mortality schedules, I mean, I could see, I don't know for sure, but I could also see, like, I mean, if, we have like death records and things like that, if potentially, there was some kind of public information that, whoever put together mortality schedules may have went to and been like, okay, this person died on this date. So they, I could see that potentially as well, but I could also see it being like and it also may be one of those, while they're going and getting the census information, they may be asking this additional information as well, since this is falling within like that year up to the census being taken. So, they could be just gathering it as they're just getting the regular census information potentially. I mean, it might save them a trip, maybe, or the family might be providing that information to them, too. I'm not really sure, but. Okay, and then there's the agriculture schedules. These were also created for the censuses of 1850, 1860, 70, and 1880. They were created to list the production of farms in the US. Some information you can learn includes the name of the farm owner, the total of improved and unimproved acres of farmland, cash value of farm, number and value of livestock, and things such as that. So it can kind of help you. It can kind of help you get an idea, especially like, I know I had a lot of ancestors that farmed and things like that. And, it can kind of help you get an idea of like what kind of farm did your ancestor have, how well off were they? How much land did they have? what kind of livestock they potentially had and things like that. So, things like this can be kind of almost like supplemental information to your research as you're researching your family ancestors. It can tell you a little more about how they lived and give you a little more detail into that kind of stuff.
Does Kentucky Historical Society have these various schedules?
We do have, now they're more like, from what I've looked at, they're more like little listings. So I'm not really sure. We may on microfilm have like the actual like full out like forms, but I know kind of behind you in our reference section, kind of near where we have like our census indexes and things like that. I know there are some agriculture like census like listings, I believe, that are for like at least 1860. I can't remember if we have any other years. And like I said, we may have something on microfilm. It's been a little while since I've really looked through a lot of that. So there are some things here. And you might also be able to potentially look at like ancestry or family search as well, because I know they do have like a census section that you can look just specifically at just the censuses. And so there might be something on there as well. Okay, and there's manufacturing schedules related to the production of industry. And these were created for 1850, 60, and 70. Businesses were listed if their products were valued at $500 or more per year. Information included was business name, the capital invested, raw materials that were used, average number of employees, monthly cost for male and female wages. And so something like this kind of also with like the agriculture schedule, if your ancestor, worked in a particular business, you might be able to learn more about what type of business that was, what their product was, how well off they were, or potentially, and how well they were paying, their workers to just kind of see what kind of a person they might have been as far as, the people that worked under them. And there was an 1880 manufacturer's schedule that included an additional special list by the category of the business. So some additional information could be things like there were, boot/shoe factories, leather and tanning and curing works and things like that kind of go along with that. Grist and flouring mills, lumber mills, sawmills, coal mines, quarries, and things like that. And so like, yeah, I've previously said this information can help you see what kind of work your ancestor may have been involved in. It may also tell you how well off they may have been, depending on if business was booming for them or not. So this is kind of another thing that kind of might help supplement, your research as far as telling you more about who your ancestor was and how they lived, how they, that kind of thing. And then there are the social statistics schedules for the 1850, 1860, and 1870 censuses. A special set of forms was used to gather statistics concerning a particular geographic area within a county. The information that could be included in this schedule: total value of real estate for division, total value of personal property, numbers and names of schools and academies, along with number of students and teachers, number of names of libraries, along with the number of books, names and number of newspapers, number of poorhouses, along with the number of paupers and the cost to support them.
Yeah, I've noticed this reference.
Hmm.
One of them wants to scholar census book.
Yeah.
That's something that contains some of this information.
Yeah, that's a book we have here that, yeah, it kind of goes and explains some of the different things, and it actually has also in it, it's got examples of just kind of like the blank versions of some of these forms as well. And continuing some other information that's also on the social statistics schedules are also number of criminals, the standard monthly wage for a farmhand in division and a day laborer, standard wage for carpenter, normal monthly wage for male and female domestics, and the average cost of board for a male laborer for the week. And so basically this is kind of another thing where, you might be able to learn more about, your ancestor and how they lived and kind of get a better idea of, if they were, participating in any of these particular aspects and, in that kind of thing. It's more of a, just kind of understanding also the community and the world that your ancestor lived in. You can also just kind of see what others like your potential ancestor may have been going through and things like that as well. And I wanted to kind of just mention these are business schedules, 1935. There were schedules of banking and financial institutions, schedules of public warehousing, schedules of radio broadcasting stations, schedules of advertising agencies, schedules of motor trucking for hire, schedules of miscellaneous enterprises. And, if your ancestor was in like a particular business that may have connected to this particular one of these schedules, it could tell you more about them or their business. And it could also, enrich your ancestor's life and story and broaden your understanding of your ancestor. But like I said, this one may not be as useful to people doing their research, but I just wanted to kind of point it out that it exists in the off chance that, your ancestor may have been in one of these particular businesses and been at that right time, and, they may be listed there, and, you could learn something new about them that you didn't know about before.
In some of these schedules, like when you listen to that manufacturing social business, they pertain more to cultural centers, communities, or towns, cities.
I mean,
Versus the rural area.
I would say so. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with like a lot of these like schedules. Like, I mean, probably like the slave and agricultural schedules are probably the only two that I've at least kind of been more familiar with and looked at. So I would say probably it would be more in that line, but I can't guarantee that. But just because I mean a lot of it's more with like I see that being more related to like factory work and like business, like in the towns and cities and things like that. But I mean there were also mills as well that were included in some of this too. So you could potentially have somebody that just has a mill out in the country somewhere, but since it's a business, they may be included potentially. All right, and that's about it. That is my contact information, in case anybody needs it. And if anybody like wants a copy of this slide, I'm more than happy to like email it to them. Or have any other complete different unrelated questions in the future, you can shoot me an email, or that's my office phone number there. I'm more than happy to answer questions and look into things for people. Let's see. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. And that is there's like the references, because I did look to that book for some of the details and information and things like that. And then also like the National Archives, and then there's the US Census Bureau as well that have a lot of information about the census as well. All right. Have any other questions?
This historical society here, do they have hard copies and copies of the census, and or I guess that's when they have one microphone perhaps, or both?
I was gonna say the censuses, now I know like in like in book form, we do have like the census indexes for, I believe, every, because we've got, I know we got 1790 up through, because we even have the like the Union soldiers, like 1890 like index as well. So technically we do have some form of census index up to 1890. Now, anything past that, we do have some certain counties. A lot of the times it's by county, it'll be like Pulaski County 1850 census or things like that. Because we do have them just strictly related to the, particular counties, and it'll just be that information. And I have seen some counties, like we have all the way up to like, I forgot which county it was, may have been Bell County. Cause I was just looking at it like a day or two ago, but I think it was like 1910 census. So we do have pretty much most counties, we've got at least like the 1850, 60, that kind of time frame census, like in book, physical book form in the counties. And then we do have on microfilm, we do have 1810 to 1900 or 1910, maybe 1920 on microfilm. Now, the only thing with that is you kind of already have to know like a page number, because like there's not any like an index or anything. So like I'll typically look at like an index from one of the books. And then if I want to like look at the actual census on microfilm, I'll be like, okay, they're on page, 34 of Pulaski County. So then I'll go find the microfilm and then look for that page number.
Glad you clarified that, because I
Yeah.
was gonna ask you, what does a census index show compared to what a census shows? And I guess it directs you to the page.
Yeah, I mean, most of the, now a lot of the, well, because we do have like just also just transcribed books of the census of certain like county censuses. So like it will have like the information that you could find also on the microfilm. Like it'll have like an index in the back, and it'll tell you that they're on page 2, and you go look and you'll see like them and like their family and like their ages at the time and like where their birthplace was. Uh, Now that a lot of those, I think that's about all I see in like the transcript. So, the ones on microfilm may have additional information. Um, but yeah, we do have like some transcribed censuses that do have like the main key information as far as like the households and ages and things like that. Um, but yeah, the index is literally, it'll just be like this one person's name, and it'll say like, it'll give like the page number and like what county they're in, and the like the district of what they're in, like what the township is. So you get that information, but yeah, that will usually just kind of tell you like, okay, I know that they're in this county, in in 1870, and then, you can go look at other records for that county looking for your ancestor, or you can take, that page number and go look at like the microfilm to see if there's any additional information, such as like the household and things like that. Any other questions? Oh, thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Thank you.